Three Righteous Mamas is a podcast brought to you by The Signal that is on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. Hi, I'm Muna Husseini.
And I'm Christina Sansoon Ramirez.
I'm Martha Pincoffs.
Thank you for joining us for the Three Righteous Mamas podcast. We love being in conversation with y'all. Please do subscribe. Leave us a review. We love to read them, and check out our merchandise, like the sweatshirt I am wearing today because I'm feeling a little cold, even though it is March in Texas, because I got my vaccine. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Just want to let y'all know our merch can be found at store.threerighteousmamas.com. So go check out our gear. Today, we're going to be chatting with Jim Hightower about what it's been like to stay in the fight over the long haul, with big ups and downs. But back to my vaccine. I actually got my second vaccine today. And, you know, I didn't realize it, y'all. I got stuck, and then I had to go wait the 15 minutes. You know, they make you wait to make sure you don't have any weird side effects or whatever. And I sat down and I just bust into tears. Like, I think I scared the people that were in line, but I didn't realize that I would feel so much relief and just gratitude that, like, okay, there's an end in sight, and something like I can just like exhale. It felt so good. Christina, I heard you got your first shot.
I got my first shot yesterday. My son, Santiago, is super baby, deserves a huge ice cream sundae because we waited in line for 5 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is
with him.
Bonkers.
With him. So I thought ahead. I brought a iPad, some snacks, but you know, it was rough.
You also potentially should get Mom of the Year for being able to do that.
I don't know. My baby's like super power because he held it down. We did have to go get some cars from the car so you can play with those. And it was a free clinic because in different states, people are now being able to get the vaccine at different ages. So this was an all age clinic. And it was mostly working class, brown and black folks. And you could just see people likewise were so relieved to get it because it's been so hard to get. So I will admit that I was bitching a lot while I was waiting in line for 5 hours. Santi complained less than I did. But in the end, my friend that was with me kept reminding me, it's like, this is a life-saving vaccine. It is totally worth a 5-hour wait. And it was, because now I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to get my next vaccine. And I really hope other people can get them because my mom's gotten one. I'm not sure if your all's parents have gotten them.
My parents have gotten both.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. I was super nervous about it until we could get them vaccinated. And Joe's mom was staying with us. She's been with us for most of the pandemic, and she got her second vaccine and went back to College Station because she can be safe there now. And she's excited about that.
My mom has diabetes and she feels like free now.
Yeah.
She was really scared.
Yeah, I'm also diabetic, and my father had dengue fever last year, and so like I don't know how much his immune system has built back up, but also my parents are both, over 70. Yeah. And I've basically just been home for the last year, right? And it's definitely hard. I mean, I see the toll it's taken on my kids and my family, and my brother's also, he's a medical professional, and so he's treated patients who have COVID too, and it's it makes me think about, is it that Neil Tyson deGrasse quote where he says something like, if some of the people are taking precautions and others aren't, it's like having a section of the pool that you can pee in.
Yeah. It's so helpful.
Thank you for that very helpful visual.
Yeah.
And there's no chlorine in the water.
Nope.
So guess what? It's going to be real gross.
Everybody's drinking pee-pee.
Everybody is. I feel like our kids could understand that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good analogy because, like, I want to be drinking no pee pee. So I would get my shot. And I will admit to being uncomfortable with getting my shot because I want, can we have it out there for a while? Do we know what the side effects are? Do we, whatever? But I will say, when the vaccine was first released in the US, and okay, being an Indian, I guess I'm stereotyping myself right now, but tons of friends and family who are all doctors, and every single one of them went out and got it. I can't think of a single friend that didn't go out and get it. And it just made my confidence go that much higher that like, okay, this is okay. Cause like, I even had friends that like read every single sentence of like the studies and, a couple of friends who participated and they were like, nope, it's really good. It's solid. Go do it.
Well, I think the best thing actually talking about that, Muna, is that people share that got the vaccine. Like I shared on my social media, yay, I got the vaccine, because I have a really good friend. He's a construction worker, immigrant worker, and he got really, really sick a few months back with COVID. I mean, just like really sick. He told me, he said, I almost called you because I thought I was dying and I wanted you to call my family in Mexico and like help me. And I was like, wow, and he was out of work for a month. And then I called him a few weeks ago and I said, oh, are you going to get the vaccine? And he said, no, I'm not. It's a government conspiracy, or it's not a government. It's a conspiracy by the rich to kill off all poor people. And I said, I'm pretty sure the rich need poor people alive to leech off of them. So I don't think they're trying to kill all the poor people.
And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later with Jim Hightower.
Jim Hightower, yeah.
Christina.
Yeah. But I mean, like I was on the phone with him and I was like, where are you hearing this stuff? And he's like, Facebook. Mm-hmm. And I am glad I talked to him, but the misinformation out there is very, very real.
Yes.
And here is someone who had COVID, who knows it's very real, who almost died from it. And yet thinks he doesn't need the vaccine. And so like, I think it's really, really important I'm glad so many of us are getting it, but do have those hard conversations with people and don't assume that people you think are getting it. Like post, share, celebrate that you've been able to get it and encourage other people to do so, because it's really serious, the level of misinformation, and also some real legitimate concerns from communities of color that have historically, especially in the Black community, been at the forefront of, being tested
on medical malpractice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and then the whole system is racist. And then it's also been extremely difficult to get the vaccine. I know people who had to stay, not everyone can stand in line for 5 hours. Not everyone can like log on at 2 a.m. and hit refresh and then stay online for the next 4 hours trying to like hit refresh and then drive 2 hours to go get a vaccine, right? Like those are all things that are easier for non-working class people that have the time, the resources to do that, right? I have two of my neighbors who are elderly and disabled who don't have a computer, and they're both like, one is legally blind and the other one has failing eyesight. And so how the heck were they supposed to sign up for vaccines, let alone go get one? And so the process has also been difficult to navigate for some folks as well. But yeah. I am glad here in Texas, I think vaccines open up to everyone starting
Monday,
March 29th. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a friend call, like it was 8:30 on Sunday night. And they said, we are in front of this grocery store. They have leftover shots. They need more people to come. And this was 3 weeks ago. We got in the car and went over there, and literally a firefighter gave us a shot in the arm. We didn't get a Band-Aid or anything. It was just pure luck. That we were able to do it.
I want to say the one last thing, because I know we have to get talking to our great guest, but just like, and we're going to talk to our guest about like how we make government also work for us, is our government is working for us. Like the scale and speed that the vaccines have started to go out in the last 100 days has been so incredible. Like it makes me proud. Like, thank you, Biden administration. Y'all are killing it. Like, thank you. It's incredible after the last 4 years to just watch that like basic concern and care and appreciation for science and facts, and also not making it a partisan thing or anything. Like everyone deserves a vaccine. You get one if you deserve one. And the last thing I want to say is that a friend of mine also sent me an article about how like there's some data that like a certain sector of white Republicans are less likely to get the vaccine. And it made me so angry at people like Ted Cruz, at Greg Abbott, who have all gotten the vaccine. And yet,
Rupert Murdoch.
Yet they question the science. They are science deniers. They say that masks aren't necessary. But you know what? They're just fine. So I don't blame those voters or those communities. I blame anyone that's willing to go and benefit from the science, go and benefit from the medication or the vaccine, and then turn around and try and make other people not believe in it. Like they're putting those people in harm's way. So that makes me really angry at them.
So let's go talk to a politician who's been doing this work for 4 decades and can enlighten us on what it takes to be successful in this political climate that we've got in Texas.
Yeehaw.
So we are so excited. Today, we are chatting with Jim Hightower, my all-time one of my favorite people and also a mentor of mine that I've learned so much from. But we're going to be talking to him about what it's like to stay in the fight over the long haul with big ups and downs, similar to what we're facing today. And if you don't know who Jim Hightower is, I believe you've been hiding under a rock, because he is a Texas legend, a national radio commentator, writer, public speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. And Jim Hightower, you wouldn't know by looking at him because he looks so young, but has spent the last 4 decades battling the powers that be on behalf of the powers that ought to be: consumers, working families, environmentalists, small business, and just plain folks. He was twice elected to Texas's agricultural commissioner, and Hightower believes that the true political spectrum is not right to left, but top to bottom. He has become a leading national voice for the 80% of the public who no longer find themselves within shouting distance of the Washington and Wall Street powers at the top. So, Jim, we are so excited to have you here.
Well, great to be with you. I'm exhausted by the introduction.
And that's the shortened version.
Yeah, okay, but that's a joy to be with you, Christina. One of the great new champions of progressive populism across the country, and certainly here in Texas, and to meet my new friends Martha and Muna, and to be part of the 3 RMs. which is very, very important. The kind of coalescing work that you are doing. It defines the new politics that extends the old politics in our state. So anyway, just a joy to be with you.
Yeah, we love having you. We could be the Righteous Mamas and the Righteous Papas, which sounds like a really good old Texas band.
It does. Right.
So,
except I have no musical ability, by the way. But nonetheless,
I once thought I did and found out I didn't. So
yeah, no,
that's
right.
Another story.
Yeah.
But one of the things we love asking our guests about is their moms or a maternal figure in their life that helped influence them, and in your case, that helped influence you to become the fighter and champion for justice you are today.
Well, my mother, I have a picture. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not.
Oh my God, that's so cute. No. Move it over a little bit. There you go. Oh my God, now we can see it.
All
yes.
Right. All right. So that's her at about 5 years old. Lily Mabel Johnson Hightower. Lily Mabel Johnson.
Great name.
On a hardscrabble farm up around Bonham, Texas, where she grew up. And notice the little shoes. I mean, they were not without style. They were probably rented shoes, because these were tenant farmers, really, and they lost their farm in the Depression. But I learned from my mother and my father the basic values. They were not political. They paid attention. They did vote and etc. But they were not active political people. But they brought the core. The golden rule. That we're all in this together. Those sort of fundamental. The Jesus of the Beatitudes. I mean, they brought those basics to myself and my two brothers, and that pretty well framed it. Now that was not entirely pure, because of course when I grew up in the 1950s mainly, I went through totally segregated schools all the way through high school, totally segregated. And then I went to University of North Texas, as it is now called, just 70 miles or so down the road, which had integrated in 1954. And I sat next to black kids from Denison, Texas, where I was raised, And so it's what Molly Ivins explained was the great lie. That's what motivated my generation into politics, was understanding we had been lied to, about what our world is and what democracy is and what possibilities are. And so that motivated us to expand all of those possibilities. But my mother and her family, I come from farm people, names like Eula and Belma and Josie. Those are my relatives, and they're very, very pragmatic, practical, but basically good-spirited people who do believe fundamentally that we're all in this together, and they recognize that we're not all in this together. That the powers that be are running roughshod over all of us. So that was kind of my framing philosophy. And it was not till I got to college at North Texas that I had a history professor, and I think my junior year or so, that I first learned the word populism, that this was an actual movement in America and had been founded here in Texas, actually, and has spread 43 states all across the country, coast to coast. And was and actually was biracial in its founding, and was extraordinarily progressive. The People's Party platform of 1892 was the first to embrace suffrage for women, was the first to endorse wage and hour laws for workers, was the first to try to outlaw lobbyists, was the first to say that political money needed to be driven. Corporations should have no role whatsoever, much less contributing money into our political system. So it's very, very progressive. And that came off of that kind of hard scrabble farm that you saw in that picture of my mother. That's where that fight came from, because they knew that they were being ripped off by the powers that be.
Ideas in Action features crucial conversations with some of today's leading thinkers and activists, published by One World, an imprint of Penguin Random House. Join Editor-in-Chief Chris Jackson and the One World team as they explore the challenges facing our society today and share ideas and perspectives from the likes of Ibram Kendi, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Alicia Garza, Brian Stevenson, Heather McGee, Carla Cornejo, Villavicencio, and more, that will help us rethink our collective past, understand our present world, and create brighter futures together.
I would love to hear from you just a little bit about you just talked about economic populism. Right. And a lot of people now hear the word populist and they've heard the term talked about because of Trump, right? And I know I can already see Jim's kind of disgust at it, but for people that you thinking back to that kind of populism that you talk about, can you help us understand, and our listeners, the difference between the populism, the economic populist you are, and what purported, is said by kind of the Trump regime that they also too were populists? Break it down.
It's totally the difference between light and day. Trump is a corporatist. He's an autocrat, a plutocrat, the absolute opposite of a Democrat, little d Democrat, which is what populism is. Populism fundamentally, it was a movement that came began on the farms, but was also in the factories in our country, and uniting labor with farmers. And it was the realization that too few people control too much of the money and power. And they use that control to get more for themselves at our expense. And that's the great fight that we've been in from the very start of America. The origins of our country, the boarding of the ships in the Boston Harbor, that was not about the king. It was about the trading corporation that was running roughshod over the merchants in our country to benefit the East India Trading Company that was royally sanctioned in England. So the rebellion has always been largely about financial power, monetary power, corporate power over ordinary folks. And from the start, even our founders, as weak of Democrats as we now see them, obviously because of the exclusion of the majority of the people from any form of democracy. But nonetheless, they understood that corporate power was the destruction of democracy and the destruction of the possibility of democracy. And that's the importance of the founding, is not, it didn't create democracy, it created the possibility. And that's what we've been struggling with, from women's suffrage, from emancipation, from the populists, from the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, women's movement, all along the way. It's about battling power, those who have it and those who don't.
Well, Jim, I just have to give that shout out to Mama Lily, Mabel Johnson Hightower, for putting you on this road. We do like to call out our guests' moms and acknowledge them for their place in putting you on your path. And you have become a Texas legend, right? You have so many accomplishments. We heard only a few of them in the intro. But as I hear you talk about this definition of populism, and it really resonates for me, I want to hear a little bit more about what in your early life set you on this course that made this be a purpose for you. Over the last 5 decades, people nowadays have attention spans that last and then are over. And you've been so driven for so long. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, it is almost the template is so huge that you don't run out of targets. And again, my initial foray into political understanding was civil rights. I graduated from college in '65, and so had been a part of the early civil rights movement, the civil rights, the Voting Rights Act, etc. But also that was the heat of the Vietnam War. And so we were in the throes of that all across the country. And young people were the ones that were challenging all the establishment theories about why this was good, which later, of course, Robert McNamara himself, the former Secretary of Defense, said we were wrong, we were terribly wrong. Well, 55,000 people died who were Americans, not counting all those elsewhere. So we just saw the fraud of the whole thing. And I've not been able to shake that. I mean, I see it reiterated again and again, and we see it today, and in too many expressions of it. So it's not been hard for me to stay motivated because the outrages are so outrageous and so personal.
Jim, I want to ask you one specific thing. You said in 1954 you attended UNT for the first time with other Black people, and that this is when you discovered or maybe formalized that you had been told a lie. Do you remember the moment that you realized that, or what that experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was powerful. It wasn't a moment. It was a dawning. I would put it like that, a dawning of this lie. And then mainly it was meeting people. You can't hate somebody if you know them, you know. And that's what the University of North Texas gave to me, was the direct presence of these people for whom I had great admiration. And what are you talking about? that they're not equal to us. I mean, that sounds so absurd now, but that was actually the issue back then. And I'll give you one more little graphic here. This is I'm doing this right again, but this is a voting certificate in 1964 when I first voted. And it says here at the top, certificate of exemption. Certificate of exemption from what? From the poll tax. You had to pay to vote. And when you first voted, if you were white, then you got exempt from paying the poll tax. And that poll tax amounts to what now would be about $30 to go vote. So that, of course, intentionally was meant to keep poor people, blacks in particular, Mexican Americans in particular, but generally just poor people from voting. And that was a deterrent. You can imagine, I mean, Christina and all of y'all, you go door to door, you're trying to get people to go vote. Courage, come on, we got to turn out, we got to turn out. And by the way, it'll cost you $30. Well, maybe not, maybe I won't go. Thank you very much. So that was just an early voting oppression that we're now, of course, experiencing. We saw the Georgia legislature this last week, and they're just disgusting. I mean, no need for me to iterate all that. Y'all know it. This is, Joe Biden was right. This is sick. This is despicable. This is un-American. This is about as anti-democratic as you can possibly be. And I think we're going to overturn it. But we're going to overturn it not because of some legality, but because of people like y'all. And that's my great hope. And that's what keeps me going in this fight for how many ever eons been in it.
That's a powerful hope that I needed to hear, because having just seen the legislation that has made it through the Texas Senate, and imagining what that's how that's gonna play out in our state. I mean, it really is. It is the most anti-democratic thing you can imagine, and they're just a bunch of fraidy cats.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah.
Fraidy cats. That's exactly what they are. So anyway, so I'm not afraid of fraidy cats. So
no.
So that's, there are many more of I've used a line before that they've got the fat cats, but we got the alley cats, and there are more of us than there are of them.
I'd rather be with the alley cats any day.
There you go.
The fraidy cats.
Alley cats always take down those fat cats.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Jim, you were the last statewide elected Democrat to a seat that I think is like the dreamiest job in the entire world, as the Texas Agriculture Commissioner. And food sort of, I've had a career in food that led me to activism. And I think that it would be particularly powerful for us and for the listeners to hear tell of how how economic populism in particular plays out in agriculture, and what you've seen in your career in the shape of farms.
Yeah.
And how that has changed and how that affects our health as a civilization.
Yeah, everything. I mean, food is it, right?
It's it.
You start with basics. Yes, and my choice and a group of supporters, that cohorts, co-conspirators that I had back in the late 70s, early 80s. We studied what was an office worth running for. It's not just enough just to run for an office. I mean, what can you do in that office becomes the important thing. If you actually have a mission in life, like little d democracy, then you want to try to choose an office where you don't just get up on the floor of the Texas State House and make a speech, but maybe you can make a difference somehow or other. And we looked at this office, Texas Agriculture Commissioner, which came out of the 1800s, out of this populist movement, really, and realized there's enormous power there. It made me the pesticide regulator of the state of Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a
So
big deal.
I could do that. We were the largest, still are, I think, the largest user of pesticides and the largest manufacturer of pesticides. And the chemical corporations controlled that the legislature on all of those environmental issues. It had enormous marketing authority. There were no farmers markets in Texas when I ran for office. There had been, of course, in the past. In fact, I had uncles who were marketed at farmers markets, but they had long been displaced. Everybody went to supermarkets. That was the ideal. I had lived in Washington, D.C., working for Ralph Yarborough, a former U.S. senator, the last great populist senator that we had in the state of Texas. And so there I was. I lived on Capitol Hill, and about 4 blocks from my home was something called Eastern Market, and it was a farmer's market, and it was just spectacular. At cheese shops and all kinds of veggies, of course, and poultry and crafts and everything. And it was a fair. Every Saturday morning was a fair.
I lived there too, and I had the same experience. Yeah.
It's just wonderful. And I thought, well, why don't we have these everywhere?
Yeah.
And then I ended up back here in Texas, and so I campaigned on, well, why don't we have farmers markets? The Dallas Morning News ran an editorial condemning me for advocating this, saying that if the people wanted farmers markets, the free market would have created them. So we don't need government getting involved. Well, the government involvement in our case was to hire 3 or 4 people who knew about creating farmers markets. They actually worked in church markets and things like that in Tennessee and elsewhere. And we brought them in and said, go out there and see if anybody wants to have a farmer's market. And so within a year, we had 100 farmers markets because people wanted them. They loved them. And now, of course, we have almost 100 here in the Austin area, but certainly across the state, because they're more, and because you work in food, this is not a commodity. This is a life. Yes. It is an expression of life and of joy and of music and everything. I mean, Willie Nelson to whoever you want to talk about. I mean, food. The homegrown tomatoes song that we've got.
Guy Clark.
The great music that is out there around food, and then the spirits who not only produce the food, but then the craft people who develop it further, and then the folks who bring it to the table for you. And that latter category has been particularly impressive and powerful, I think, important in this last year in the pandemic to see Tedesco and so many other Ileana de la Vega and these chefs in our city, Jesse Griffiths and others, pour out. And then the farmers markets, of course, Carol Ann Sale, and then at Boggy Creek, and all the rest of them. It's a community that is real, not a corporate ad, but an actual community of people who connect with just regular people, and you can connect with them, and that's the beauty of the food economy to me. And I understood this early on. Susan DeMarco and myself, early co-conspirator and cohort, and that we in the 70s in Washington, we started the Agribusiness Accountability Project. And it was about food and about the rise of monopoly in food. And we battled Earl Bunce, who was that was to become the Agriculture Secretary of the United States. And we nearly defeated him, came within 2 votes of beating him to be the Ag Secretary, because he was a complete corporate whore. And he said that there is no
Thank God.
that there is. He said there's no problem with these driving farmers out of business, because that frees them to do something useful in their lives. He was the Agriculture Secretary. So and we had friends, because in the 70s food wasn't that big and as a policy issue, and we had friends who were working on big peace and all sort of other important issues, urban issues, and etc. And they said, well, why are you talking about agriculture? And we said, we're not talking about agriculture. We're talking about power. If you can't control your dinner, you don't have any control at all.
Right.
And that's the truth of it. And that's what has changed. I'm babbling on, but I'll do one more little story here. We did a book called Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times, which was about our land grant college system in America that was in service to agribusiness versus farmers and consumers and workers and et cetera. And the title came from the fact that the University of California at Davis, the land grant college in that state, had developed a hard tomato because Del Monte Corporation wanted to do away with farm workers. So they wanted a mechanical harvester. And so the college developed a mechanical harvester, but it squished the tomatoes. And so they then made a tomato that was harder, so it could withstand the machine. So this was the insanity that was going on. And DeMarco went to the head of ag research at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in a meeting and was questioning him about these tomatoes. And he said, oh, they're marvelous. You can ship them across the world. And they don't go bad. They just stay right there, firm as they could possibly be. And she said, yeah, but I grew up in New Jersey, and we had those rich tomatoes there, the Rutgers tomatoes, and these aren't quite as tasty as those were. And he leaned over to her and said, your children will never know the difference.
It's true, though. Yeah, I mean, right. That's the sad part, is that until you go to a farm and taste like a warm tomato, you can't pull back the curtain.
Yeah.
So they were successful.
Well, that was the revolution, of course.
Yeah.
Because the people did know the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that led to the farmers market movement and the good food movement and all the work that you're doing now. So
thank you so much.
Adds up. Just adds up.
If you enjoyed the discussions about political change and creating a better future on Three Righteous Mamas, we recommend checking out the Democracy Works podcast. The show features conversations with academics and activists who are working to strengthen democracy in the United States and around the world. Previous guests include Sabeel Rahman of Demos, democracy scholar and activist Astra Taylor, and jazz legend Wynton Marsalis. New episodes of Democracy Works are released every Monday. Find the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's great.
Earlier you made a comment about fat cats versus alley cats. And I was thinking at that moment, was it intimidating for someone who grew up on a farm and then ended up moving into politics? But then as I hear you talking, I feel like you actually stayed in your lane and you took your lane back when you stepped into politics, is the feeling I get as I'm listening to you, because you were like, wait, I know about this. I grew up on a farm. I know what's best for my people, right? And so was there intimidation when you started moving into politics for yourself? Kids these days, even myself, right? I can feel like imposter syndrome is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did not grow up on a farm. I grew up in a small business family. Both of my parents came off of farms. I did not, but I was in a farming community, and my aunts and uncles, and so et cetera. But yes, your basic point is, yes, I knew these people. I knew who they were. I knew, I mean, just instinctively. I hadn't studied it, but I knew that they had good little d democratic instincts. And yes, it was. I mean, when I stepped out to do it, I stepped out to do it initially because Texas liberals had become reclusive. Sissy Farenthold had run for governor. You don't know her, you need to look her up because she's terrific. And she's still with us, by the way. She's down in Houston. And she ran a great race. Of course, George McGovern had run for president, lost badly. And so the liberals in Texas had shrunk in. They thought, oh my God, it's become a right-wing state. And so we've got to be cautious. But I knew that they were talking about people like my parents and like those, my Aunt Eula and et cetera. And yeah, if you ask them if they were liberal or conservative, they'd probably say, well, I'm conservative, but they didn't mean that they were corporatists. They didn't mean that they were anti people being able to vote. They didn't mean any of that kind of stuff. And so I decided to launch out there and try to run a campaign, a statewide campaign that would try to unite those forces. And the ag department was a perfect office, really, because you could bring in farm workers, you could bring in, of course, farmers, you could bring in environmentalists, you could bring in rural communities. You could, it was just so broad and so possible. And you could tell those people, I could go to farmers in this state and say, every farmer in Texas could line up and you would not reach Austin. The power is in the cities. 3 cities control 75% of the vote. Your friends are the ones you're being told are your enemies, environmentalists and consumers and labor. Those are the people you got to unite with them, and we can all do something together. And so that was the politics that I tried to put together.
It sounds like something that needs to happen right now.
It does. And that brings us to y'all. Because y'all are the ones to do this, and it is happening. It's out there. People want this,
right?
And we've seen it from some of the recent Course Christina's efforts. But there are many more, and we're actually winning battles, including at county levels and city levels, and those are very, very important races because that builds our strength for the long haul.
So when you talk about the long haul. I was telling another friend that he and I are lifers in this work. Not everyone's a lifer, and that's okay. Not everyone has to be, but he and I were lifers. And, we're seeing a wave of young people get engaged in the political process right now. And it's so beautiful to see their courage and imagination, their boldness really pushing our country in the right direction. We were just talking earlier about how a few years ago, we weren't talking about addressing the root causes of migration on the Democratic side. And now you see that in the proposal versus what used to be there, which was bipartisan, which was $40 billion for border security. That a few years ago, the Muslim community is still under assault, but was so much more under assault. And people would throw the Latino community, the Muslim community, and the queer community on the Democratic side, our side, under the bus. Yep. And, but I think it's also, as someone that's a lifer, it's easy to get jaded quickly, especially with so many young people coming into the process and the political powers that be being so entrenched, though change does happen. And what's kept you going, especially in Texas in a really tough political climate? And what's your advice for young people that, may suffer from burnout or getting jaded or feeling like, am I making a difference?
I don't want to be glib about this because making a difference is very hard. And you have probably more downs than you have ups. But the ups have got to be what motivates you, and particularly the people that you can inspire. It's not just you out there doing your bit on a particular issue, but the people that you enlist, and then you connect to other people to form something larger than yourselves, and then to form a community of change. And that is ultimately, of course, what we're trying to do. And the thing, so the one thing I would say is learn your history. I mentioned Ralph Yarborough. I mentioned Sissy Farenthold. These are names that probably y'all don't even know because it's not taught in school. Ralph Yarborough was U.S. Senator for 13 years in the state of Texas. He was an instigator of a people's movement. The Texas Observer was created out of the Yarborough fight in the 1950s. So many other, Henry B. Gonzalez was a part of that, got elected out of San Antonio, the first Mexican American to be in the state legislature, state senate, and then the U.S. Congress. Barbara Jordan out of Houston came out of that movement. We had a movement, and it had a media connection through the Observer. The Observer was created because, and this is instrumental because of what y'all are doing. You're doing this this Facebook podcast thing here, which is the new version of the Texas Observer. We had no media back in the 1950s. Ralph Yarborough could appear in Dallas, Texas, and draw 5,000 people to a meeting, and there would not be a mention of it the next day.
Wow.
In the Dallas Morning News. And so our slogan for the Dallas Morning News was, if it happens in Dallas, it's news to us. So you got to find your way around it, and you got to have that sense of humor and outrage and sassiness and non-compliance, and so the Observer was created specifically to be able to connect the progressive movement in Texas together. Labor helped to fund it. And then they built a politics around it. The Harris County Democrats, led by a woman named Billy Carr, for years, just a giant of a woman. These are names you don't know, but Minnie Fisher Cunningham out of the Liberty, Texas area. I mean, she ran for governor of Texas. Ran for governor. I mean, back before almost she could vote. I mean, we have this history and this maverick spirit in our state that is so tenacious and so ingrained in what it is to be Texas that we need to connect that to today's movement, because that gives the young people some sense of, oh, well, we could do something. We have made progress. You don't have to pay to vote, at least. Yeah. These days, that didn't happen by accident. That was a huge fight over years. And in fact, the AFL-CIO paid poll taxes of poor people in East Texas to be able to allow them to go vote. That's what we had to do, and so it's nothing. The challenges we face are new, but they're not anything new, really. Again, they come down to that issue of too few people have too much of the money and power. And we're battling that. And if you put our politics in those terms, the people of Texas will respond to it, including people who think they're Trumpistas, will respond to that message, because that's the message they thought Trump was giving them.
Right.
And turns out it was a great lie. But our message has to be a stronger sense of they're trying to, that they are stiffing you, and so that's what the Bessemer fight of Amazon is all about, and the importance of it over in Bessemer, Alabama, or the fight of the great folks down on Seadrift on the Gulf Coast of Texas against the Formosa Plastics Corporation down there. All of our fights are linked. And that is, I think, the great chore of progressives today, each of us, is to understand that that we can't win our fight without winning their fight. And so if if there's if the immigrant, you can't just ignore immigrant issues and think then you're going to be okay on labor issues. You're not. And if you're not going to be okay on labor issues if you don't deal with environmental issues, and right on down the line. So the understanding, and this is the great scare for the right wing, the established elites, which are tiny, by the way. Again, we're talking about the fat cats, the few of them. They are terrified if we ever get together. And so that is why their effort has historically, from the start of this country, been to divide us racially and in every way that they can find to possibly divide us. But race has been the key one.
I love hearing you talk about this sort of maverick spirit that we have here. And I'll be honest, you talking about it is the first time I felt like I could claim that as my legacy, even though I'm a child of immigrants, because you shared that in a way where I was like, wait, those are my people. I identify with that. Whereas when I've heard that talked about before, I felt like there was a very clear line, and I couldn't be part of that legacy. And so I really want to thank you for that. As I hear you talk, and this is something Christina and Martha and I were talking about earlier, was that we feel like communities are coming together in ways that we haven't seen before, and that the dialogue is starting to change. What is it that gives you hope about the place we're in right now in this time? Is there something unique or different about this time that we're in as compared to the decades of politics that you've seen that's giving you hope? Any trends or just things that delight you?
Well, y'all. I mean, they said the three mamas. I mean, start with that. I mean, this is a coalescence. In your case, three, but that we didn't have in the past, and an understanding that that is the key, and I see that in people. I see it in Black Lives Matter and other movements that come within that. I mean, all the movements. We can make a long list of the movements, but that's the problem. In the past, we made a list of movements and made it a letterhead, rather than a movement, rather than let us all sit down and what are the values and what are the targets that we have that we can join together in and do battle. And I think particularly this voter suppression fight is enormously a huge favor to us, bizarrely, because it does unite every one of our constituencies to understand. Because it, they like to say, well, that's about, we're just trying to keep those Black people from voting, or those Muslims from voting, immigrants, and we don't want any Native Americans voting, and but no, they're going after union members, they're going after senior citizens, they're going after students. They don't want us to vote, and that us is the big change that I see taking place. That there's a bigger awareness of us than there was before, and a bigger possibility of us.
You all know that there are some amazing podcasts out there, and we've come across one that we think you're really going to like. Stepping into Truth, Conversations on Race, Gender, and Social Justice is hosted by Omkari Williams. Omkari is a Black queer activist intent on making activism a part of everyday life for everyone. As part of her mission, she talks with people from philanthropists to filmmakers, writers to farmers, and so many other folks who are doing the work. These conversations will inspire you to do activism your way and make the difference you can. Find Stepping into Truth wherever you get your podcasts.
I think about all of the relationships you must have had on your way to where we sit now, and the people that you have co-conspired with like names that we know, like Ann Richards and Barbara Jordan and Molly Ivins, names that we need to know, like Sissy Farrenholt and Ralph Yarborough. And in this podcast, the thing that we're talking about is delivering the world for our children, and economic populism really does tie all of those threads together, just like you've said. And it's such a rare treat to get to sit with somebody like you, who has seen so much and who has you've ridden through some storms here. And so I am curious, what would you like for the Jim Hightower legacy to be?
Well, the legacy is a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a part of it. I mean, I understood that. Instinctively, coming out of college and out of Denison, Texas, I understood that. And I go back to my parents there. They gave me that too. I mean, you didn't start anything. You're not a genius, but you're smart and you're good enough and you can continue this. And so that sense that from the founding of the assailing of the ships in the Boston Harbor forward, and really before that, but all of our history has been this constant pushing of regular people against the elite and moneyed interests to extend democracy just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There was a group here in Austin years ago, and it had the best name I've ever heard. And it was a group pushing to limit campaign donations in our city elections. And they succeeded, actually, for a while. Anyway, they were called Austinites for a Little Less Corruption. That's what I think we're talking about. I mean, just take a step at a time,
Yeah.
Let's advance. But now I think we're making big strides again, because as Mona and I were talking, that there's a bigger us.
Yeah.
And I hear that in groups like People's Action, the Georgia Voters Project, it's sort of all these great grassroots groups that are out there. These are not the big national names, but they're the ones doing the actual work on the ground. And they get the us message and are beginning to come together. I do a thing with Christina on, in fact, called the Lowdown Happy Hour. That's my Hightower Lowdown newsletter. Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe, which is where I am right now. My kitchen. Anyway, and we had these great
kitchen, a cafe. You're inspired.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Why not? And we had these great guests from across the. So we had in UFOT, Inside UFOT. What's her name? The great Zephyr Teach Out, great antitrust leader out of New York, fabulous woman. We had Marcia Ball for Mardi Gras.
She was my softball coach.
They were fantastic. Yeah, she is a wonderful human being.
Yes, she is.
And has done so much of bringing musicians together into a coalition that could help them with healthcare and some of the basics of life. So I've always benefited from musicians and tried in all of my political endeavors because the arts and the culture advises politics. Politics doesn't advise the culture. It's the opposite. Mm-hmm. And so the artists, the musicians, the food craft people, these are the ones that know how to connect to people. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be our main avenue of pursuit, because you can reach people a whole lot better with a little bit of music. than you can with a lengthy speech.
You know what's so striking to me, and that I think is an undersold part of being politically engaged, is it's fun.
Yes.
It's really
Hello.
fun.
Hello. Yeah, right. Yeah. I've always
We made
believed
great
in that.
friends. Like I made
Yes.
Luna became my friend, Martha became my friend. I mean, Jim
Yeah.
became my friend and kind of my
Absolutely.
wisdom and sage that I go to for,
Yeah,
sound.
but all that's beside the point. It's got to be fun. I mean, and,
Yeah.
as I say, battling the bastards is about as much fun as you can have with your clothes on. So you should just get out there and do it.
Well, let's consider this a battle.
Yeah.
There you go.
I love that, Jim, you're an older man now, because I wonder what it was like if you would use that line 30 years ago. But like,
Yeah, well, that would
it's
be
like
yeah,
hilarious
right.
and innocent.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I did use it 30 years ago.
I did. You did. I know about it.
Right. Different connotation.
different time period.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much for being with us
Well,
today.
thank you. My joy. Thank you.
So
He's the cutest.
I just want to like pinch his cheeks and hug him.
well, the other thing you need to know, can I tell you a little story about Jim really quickly?
Yes.
So when, because I wasn't like planning to run for Senate or anything. It wasn't on my 2020 bucket list. And so, I was asked to do it. And one of the first people, I think, besides my mom and dad that I called was Jim. And Jim came over to my house and like sat with me. We had tacos and like, he just had the most sound advice. And what I love about Jim is not just like, and what I appreciate about him isn't just how long he's been in the fight, but how he is always willing to share his life experiences and wisdom with other folks that are coming up after him that are also inspired in doing the work because of him. And so for me, I felt so grateful to him. Like for me, Jim is in many ways like mentor, family, just an incredible gift to our state and country. And like, I'm just so grateful for him. Like to know that you can call on a person like that and that our guests get to hear from him as well is just incredible.
Yeah, in this world of Zoom, it's such a flat way of connecting. He really came through as being just very salt of the earth, genuine. Like you don't need a filter because what you see is what you get, and like kind, but strong at the same time, and like a couple of paradoxes maybe sitting together. But then I just find that so endearing. Like I want the people who I surround myself with to be that way, where it's like you are authentic and someone I want to spend more time with. And I think if you enjoy spending time with people, then the work is just going to be a joy, even if it's difficult work, right? Like you stay in it.
Yeah. I think hearing him talk gave me this sense that I haven't had in a long time, but like this sense of pride of being like one of those Texas sort of wildcats, which is like what we are and who we are and what we're trying to remind people that this is fun and that we have a lot of work to do, but we're going to do it together, and we're going to eat tacos and listen to music and support each other. It's like a real sense of hope and play and what is actually right for the people.
Mm-hmm.
What a life.
He had so many sayings today that I absolutely just love, right? Like, I'm not afraid of fraidy cats, or, the whole You got fat cats, we got alley cats.
I know.
babe.
I love that. I just like saw that as like a sticker or a t-shirt. I was like some really raggedy looking cat ready for a fight. Okay.
Yeah.
That's us.
Totally.
It makes me think that when you have substance, you don't have to worry about packaging so much. And I absolutely love his packaging, but I just feel like so many people feel like you have to look a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, dress a certain way to be accepted. But he's the real deal, and it comes through in that authenticity. I mean, I feel really inspired right now, like super inspired, and it made me really happy to talk to him, just knowing that we've had someone fighting for us for so long that has seen so much. I mean, when he held up that what was that, like a voter registration card from 1965 that had the poll tax on it, like the fact that he has it just sitting there on his desk
As a reminder.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that definitely, Christina, you and I would have been paying that poll tax
Yeah.
if it wasn't still the case. I know my family would.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe we wouldn't be paying it and we just wouldn't be represented. They're doing it.
Right.
They're doing it in new ways. But that's what the great thing is about Jim, is like it's a reminder of how the past is in the present. And I personally just like am going to try and carry his continued and forever hope that you do make progress, that things do get better. And that's what I'm really walking away with. And I hope our listeners do too.